responsible for anything beyond his capacity is applicable to all. So, later generations are not going to be reprimanded for the evils committed by their elders. Why is God so different from humans? That's a tough question. Um, I guess because He's God. Had He been like us, we probably would have confused Him to be another person, a superhuman. God is unique. God is special. God is complete. We humans are mortals. We are here for a very short while. We are weak, we are vulnerable, uh, and therefore, the one who has created us, the one who is running the affairs of this world, he couldn't have been like us. He had to be different. So, he is perfect and we are imperfect. The creator should be like what he has created is not a principle. Man makes cars, but man is not car. You know, so when you make things according to your abilities, your imagination. Um, the fact that you should be like what you've made is not necessarily a principle. But I do appreciate it's a very good question. Okay. If our intellect is limited in questioning for predestination, is there a concept of our will? Do we have say in our decisions, or it is all pre-decided? Uh, I did not go into the details of this particular issue, but let me try to clarify a little more. Uh, God has been introduced to us through His attributes. All His attributes are perfect. All His attributes are simultaneously functioning. So, God's attribute of knowledge is perfect. Perfection of knowledge means that He knows everything that happened in the past, that is happening right now, and that is going to happen in the future. If He doesn't know a part of what is going to happen in the future, well, He's imperfect and He cannot be God. So, God knows everything. However, while He knows everything, He is also completely just and fair. It would be grossly unjust to require a person to be accountable for something that he didn't do on his own. He was forced to do it. I mean, how unfair that, he pushes me to tell a lie and then he asks me, why did you tell a lie? So what could be the answer? Sir, you forced me to do it. So no, that's not going to happen. You will be held accountable for the deeds that you did on your own, that originated from you. You did them, decided about them, and for that, of course, it really has to be accepted, and the Quran is absolutely clear about the fact that we are all independent agents. That is actually what caused the angels to ask this question. That is what worried them. Because when they heard about the plan, they came to learn about the fact that God is now about to create someone who will be independent, free, and this freedom is going to be misused. That's what they imagine. So, God knows everything, but He has made us free agents to a certain extent. Most certainly, we cannot do everything that we do on our own. At times, what we do is probably forced upon us, and be absolutely sure that to the extent we are expected to do things which are forced upon us, we are not accountable. I'm not accountable to God for the family that I was chosen to born in. Probably I'm not going to be accountable for the time I would die, and so on. There are other things that I'm not going to be accountable for because they are out of my reach. I do not choose to do them. Uh, but when I do something, even if freely, God knows beforehand. How is it possible? Well, that's what the problem is. We cannot know it. So, is it that when we cannot fully comprehend and appreciate fathom the volume, the magnitude of a problem, therefore it's wrong. No, no, that's not the principle. I mean, 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, I can say with confidence wrong. But if somebody who's not an expert in mathematics, if an expert in mathematics writes an equation on the board and I say I don't understand it and therefore it's incorrect, well, it's going to be a pretty silly, foolish statement to make. I don't understand it and therefore it's wrong. No, I think the right statement is I really don't know it because I have my limitations. I can't know it. That's what the problem is when we are dealing with predestination, that God knows, and yet what we are doing on our own, and therefore we are responsible. Well, how is it possible? Well, at times, you see dreams, and they come true, and they come true in a way that you are actually doing things independently, and yet they were known before. Okay.
Can I just ask something here? Is it interrupting?
The?
A little one?
Oh, sorry.
Can I just kind of comment or maybe
Please. Comments obviously. Comments
I
are
was
most
just
welcome.
thinking the way I understood this predestination was if I give my son a car or a book, I know he's going to take a car, but I didn't force him to take a car. So the same concept just expanded, I think, I don't know, 1,000 times, and then he just knows
Yeah.
everything.
And we can imagine it, we can come up with examples wherein we try to help ourselves, our kids, others explain that, look here, in a limited application, the concept is what we can understood as well. Intellect is limited and inherently flawed. How does one know that intellect is being used to construct meaningful and accurate conclusions with regard to religion? Intellect is a tool that analyzes. You have data, information, which you are able to categorize, analyze, and draw conclusions. This ability or tool is what we can employ positively, properly, and sometimes we can misuse it as well. What is the criterion? Well, there's another thing that you have inside you called conscience that actually gives its verdict as to whether what you have done through your intellect is right or wrong. Okay, sometimes there could be occasions when you may not be quite sure as to whether your intellect is being properly employed or not. Well, in those occasions, God is not going to hold you responsible for what you're doing. But, we have within us an ability to know what is right from what is wrong. We have a conscience that pricks, which protests when we are doing things wrong, and encourages us when we are doing things which are good. While we are using our thinking process, and we are coming to conclusions, there is this analysis going on the one hand, and there is a verdict coming from the conscience on the other. The two go hand in hand. So, we do have a reason to believe on many occasions as to whether what we are doing is right or wrong. And let's say even if at times we are doing not completely correctly, and our conscience is letting us know that what we are doing is right, well, we're not going to be held accountable for it. That is why it is said that please understand what is right as best as you can. Let others know what you think is right. Don't accuse others for what they're doing because you think it's wrong. Just help them understand. This world is simple, but not quite as simple. There are complexities. Okay, I thought it started from somewhere else. Are there limits in using intellect in religion? In religion, we have been given divine revelation, wahi, God's message. The precise role of wahi is to guide our intellect. So whenever you come across through the use of your intellect that wahi God's book, God's message is telling you something uh, which your intellect is not quite as appreciating as you would like to. We have to submit to the understanding of Wahi and continue to think as to whether what we have understood is right or wrong. There are two possibilities. Either our intellect had gone wrong and therefore Wahi is taking care of it, or we didn't understand Wahi properly. We did not interpret it properly. So intellect has always got to be used, and of course it has to be questioned as well. When I say that intellect has to play an important role, I don't mean that whatever thought, fancy idea comes to your mind is divine. What it means is that there is a process inside us which has to be taken seriously. That's the reason why we are expected to understand God's religion. That is going to be the reason why we are going to be held accountable. So if we are not going to use our intellect, well, we might end up doing things which are contrary to God's expectations. More of it in the second session, inshallah. Comment on hadith instructing Sikh to drink camel's urine. How would that work? Well, I would go to the source and find out whether the source is correct or not. And I will tell myself that, for those people who are convinced that the source is correct, well, then there is something that as yet has not been discovered. But for those who, on the contrary, believe that because it's something which is coming as a message from hadith, which was gathered by humans, there could be a problem in the manner it was transmitted, well, they would say that we don't think that God's messenger could have said that. So this kind of a debate would always happen, because we are in a situation where there could be two different perspectives. On the one hand, there is a claim that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, said such and such thing. And on the other, there is a very strong verdict from your intellect coming, which says that this couldn't be possible. Now, had it been mentioned in the Quran, well, we would have said that forget about your intellect. What the Quran is saying is the ultimate statement of fact, ultimate verdict. But because it is coming from a source about which one can debate that the process of it getting transmitted and communicated could have some faults in it, one can always have more than one opinion about it. There can always be a dispute. We have been asked not to go too far to look for Allah. It can lead you to become a disbeliever. I don't know where it's said. I mentioned where it is said, and I've made a comment on it. The Quran says, mentions. I don't want to go into the details of the verses. There are two verses coming to my mind. One in Al-Baqarah and one in Al Imran, where the Almighty draws our attention towards what you can see around in this world, and says, in it are signs liqawmi yaqilun, for the people who use their intellect, li ulil albab, the people who are intelligent, who are trying to understand. So God would say that, look here, use your intellect to understand me, but don't use it too much. Well, he has said that don't use it too much only in the case where we are talking about areas where we cannot properly comprehend. But other than that, the more you try to understand, the more hopefully you will come close to God. But there is always a condition. There is always one important principle that needs to be mentioned. The intellect has to be employed positively with good intentions. It can always be misused. Like any other facility, any other tool, your intellect can be used positively as well as negatively. I mean, your physical strength that you have, you can use it usefully for many purposes. Well, we can imagine that a physical strength of an individual can be misused as well. So it all depends on how you use it. But if you find that individual who had a strong body killed another person, you don't go on telling people that, look here, don't have strong bodies. Let's be weak, and that probably might help in overcoming the issue of evil. No, it's a facility. It's a great ability that the Almighty has given us. We try our best, but sin also frequently. How will we be treated Will we go to hell? Um, Hopefully not. Uh, you know, uh, my understanding is that people are not going to go to the hell because they sinned. They're going to go to the hell because they insisted on sinning, despite knowing that it was wrong. To err is human, but to do it repeatedly, despite knowing that what you're doing is wrong, is what evil is, what is satanic, devilish. So I think we are all here for a trial wherein we have been provided with freedom, and at times because we got freedom, we falter, we slip, we fall down. But God has given us another ability to realize that what we have done is wrong, and as and when we realize, we are expected to come back to our correct ways, to get up and start moving, proceeding properly. There are degrees of intellect. If intellect is so pivotal, why punish those who do not possess the degree of intellect? For example, mentally challenged people. That's an interesting question. And that actually, the answer to this question would help understand that there is a very direct role of intellect in religion. Because the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, is reported to have said that there are three people who are exempt from accountability. Rufi al-qalam, the pen has been lifted in the case of Anith Thalath, in the case of three people. And one of them is a person who is a lunatic, whose intellect is not functioning properly. The other is the child who has yet reached the age of maturity. And the third is a person who is unconscious or is sleeping. So, so long as your intellect is not functioning, you're not accountable. As and when it starts functioning, that's where the trouble starts. So if somebody is challenged, well, he's not accountable. There are different levels of intellect. Does it open the door for to explore others who are less intellectual? How do you see social, economic factors role in purification? You see, when we are using our intellect, it is not an exercise in isolation. We are always a part of an environment. God Almighty has given us this good news that when He's going to hold us accountable, He's going to take into consideration our limitations, our constraints. In other words, He will look at what was there in our life that could have actually effectively hampered the possibility of us doing right. And if in His judgment, and of course His judgment would be the best, He concludes that some of the things that we did wrong were not because of our own fault, but it was because of the influence exerted by the society. He will not hold people responsible for what they did if they were forced by circumstances. The Quran mentions quite a few examples. The Almighty mentions that even though consuming pork and some other edibles is prohibited, فَمَنِ اسْتُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. If there are some people who use them, consume them not willingly and only to the extent that there was need, God is going to be forgiving. God is forgiving, merciful. Over intellect can cause people to even negate existence of God. How do we balance use of intellect to find and believe God? I think it's the wrong use of intellect, misuse of intellect. People make it a point of prestige that once they have made a conclusion, they are not going to move out of it. I just can't ever understand that a truly honest and intelligent person would say that this brilliant world came about out of a fluke happening, and that fluke happening is continuing to play its role. It's all happening without anyone doing it. It's just fluke. It's very horribly difficult to understand. How could it ever be imagined? I think like A person with ordinary intellect like me can be a good person or an evil person. A very intelligent person can be a very good person or an evil person. It's not the use of intellect, but the manner it's used that really is matter. As I said, to have a good body, strong body is not a bad idea. It's a misuse of it that really is problematic. You can use your body, strong body, for positive purposes as well. Everyone has a different perspective of Quran and religion. They interpret religion to sometimes what they feel is right. Where does intellect come in here? You know what? I mean, the Quran tells us that the message of the Quran is absolutely clear, that the Quran has come to remove confusions, give you the right path. Now, but that doesn't really mean that the Almighty is saying that the Quran, when you will read it, you will say, hey, I have got it, no problems. And the next man would say, I also got it, this is brilliant. No, if that would have been the case, there would have been no trial. We are all influenced by our background, the scholars that we are impressed by, our circumstances, and so on. So while potentially the Quran is clear, and it becomes clear when you use your intellect, but the use of intellect has its own difficulties, it has its own challenges. And therefore what happens is that even though we all try to understand the Quran, we understand it differently. What I understand is that if we were ever able to remove all the obstacles that are there in the way of understanding the Quran through our intellect, we would all agree completely. But we have our limitations. And don't be too disappointed that we have limitations, because that is what God knows. He himself has designed this life to have limitations, so that he knows that he should figure out as to who are the people who were able to exert more and sincerely given those limitations. So had God wanted everybody to be together as one group of people, understanding and believing in everything the same way, he would have done it. But then the purpose would have been lost. It wouldn't have been a trial. It would have been robots, just doing things, everybody agreeing. That would have been a very boring world. So I think there is a lot of merit in diversity and differences. But it really has to be kept within limits, and we should not do anything intentionally wrong. Everyone has a different perspective of Quran and religion. I'm assuming that I'm going to go up until 12:05. Everyone has a different perspective of Quran and religion. Oh, I've done it. How to use intellect in a positive light and not negative where it hurts your beliefs. If somebody has said something, I assume what saying, if somebody says something against your beliefs, be patient, try to understand. And if you have come across an argument or a presentation which goes against your beliefs, use your intellect, be open, try to understand. It's a trial, like you have other trials in life. I can assure you that if you are well-meaning and you're using your intellect properly, this temporary difficulty and challenge is going to give way to stronger faith. That is what you must do. Continue to use it. Yes, we are at times challenged. At times it seems that it's threatening our faith. But goodness me, what do you mean? What faith are you talking about? We are Muslims, we have our own faith. Christians have their own faith. So if the Christian also follows the same policy and defends his understanding that Jesus is the Son of God and says that, just don't talk to others about it. Intellect is useless. Then of course, he is also right. A Hindu is also right. A Jew is also right. Everybody is right. Then nothing is right. It's all confusion. No, not at all. That's not true. It is your intellect, if properly employed honestly, it enables you to know what is right and what is not right. But then, of course, there are complications. Intellect is God's given gift. Will we be accountable if we do not use it to understand God? There is an absence of use of God's blessings, which are only going to mean that you will be deprived of high rewards. and there is another absence of use of it which is criminal. At times, if you're not using your intellect to believe in God, it could be criminal, because what you're doing is causing actually you to draw away from God. You're not doing it properly. But if you're lazy and you're believing in God nonetheless, well, I think you're just depriving yourself of higher levels of achievement, which is not a great idea. I mean, don't be a criminal. I mean, if somebody is criminally neglecting his intellect, then of course it's a crime. But if you are lazily neglecting your intellect, probably, hopefully, it's not going to be a crime. It's going to be just a case of depriving yourself of higher levels of achievement. Interpretation causes confusion, as intellectual interpretation of Quran is influenced by cultures, upbringing, etc. What is right? What do you propose, sir or madam, brother or sister? What do you propose? Should I pick one scholar and follow him blindly, knowing that the others have a completely different point of view? At times, what others are saying means that this scholar that I have chosen to follow is not just wrong, what he is saying is misleading. And I say, never mind, he's my scholar, he looks good, he speaks well. I can't. I have to use my intellect to find out whether what he's saying is right or wrong. So, no, I mean, yes, there are cultural influences, there are influences of upbringing, but then we also have an intellect given to us by God, which He Himself insists is to be used for us to be able to understand what is right from what is wrong. Why Iqbal was so critical of Khalid intellect when intellect can make mistakes? Well, I think he was critical of the intellect that was misused, and it was used for the purpose of just proving a point which was taking you away from religion. So it was the misuse of intellect which would take you to an exaggerated level of intellect at the expense of divine revelation that he criticized. You said a lunatic will not be judged by Allah. What about those around such a person who suffer and have to pick up the pieces left behind by this lunatic? Well, they are going to be given concessions for whatever difficulties that they confronted. They are going to be held accountable on the basis of their limitations. If they have suffered because of somebody who God chose not to give intellect, well, God knows it. He's put you in a trial. And if you go through the trial properly, well, you have done a great job, and God, hopefully, inshallah, is going to reward you for it.
So, inshallah, we're going to start another, lecture session. Reminder: you can help yourself with the tea to keep ourselves, active.
Busy.
And yeah, exactly. So, otherwise, about the another thing I want to talk about is we just experimenting with this new question format. We're going to review it again, before the next session. So I know some of you want to ask directly. So please feel free to give us feedback so that we know what's the preference. But for now, we're going to stick to what we have decided already.
Honest to God, for one thing, I have been able to answer so many questions because. But I don't want to sound biased.
Okay. So please, Dr. Saab, you can start the.
Where is my tea, sir?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll bring it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So now we start the next session. If you remember, the last time I started my presentation by saying that this 2-hour session is to be divided into 2 parts. One, I said, is what I describe as the conceptual part, and the other is what I call the application part of the concept. I'm not too sure whether the categories are too neat, but now I proceed to the second part. At times you come across certain verses which you have a feeling are not quite as strongly emphasized as they should be. And this verse, which I have written before you, is one of them. The reference of this verse is very easy to remember. It's Surah number 10 and verse number 100. 10:100. The verse has something I nothing directly to do with what I have mentioned as yet. God Almighty says, وَمَا كَانَ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. It is not possible for an individual to believe except by the leave, the permission of God. وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And he casts filth over the hearts of those who do not use their intellect. I think it's a very profound verse. If you try to understand in the reverse order, just for the sake of understanding, what it essentially means is that if you are not going to use your intellect, then you would allow filth, rich, to influence you. And if filth is going to influence your mind and your heart, you'll not be able to believe. Right? Now, of course, this belief is the true, genuine belief. If you believe properly, you believe the way God expects you to believe. You understand, you reflect, and you realize. And it's an ongoing process. This belief, believing in this manner, according to this verse, is not possible unless you use your intellect properly. And the reason is that if you don't use your intellect, the verse suggests that your mind, your heart can actually get contaminated. It can actually get influenced by filth. What is that? I mean, you don't use your intellect, so you will start following tradition blindly. You will start repeating what people are saying in the name of religion. And unwittingly, in many cases, you would accept what is unacceptable. You will do what is not required to be done. You will adopt an attitude which is going to be rigid, inflexible. You will accuse people of doing things which are not wrong. So, the danger is that if you're not going to employ your intellect, the end result is going to be that you will be in the middle of filth. Not material, not physical, but moral, spiritual, intellectual. And the end result is God is saying that God would not allow such people to believe. Now here is a mention in the Quran which gives us a reason to understand belief in somewhat different manner, from a different perspective. Belief, by the way, generally speaking, we understand, is something that you get by birth. I am a believer. You know why? Because I was born a Muslim. You are a believer because you were born a Muslim. God Almighty seems to be saying, not at all. Not at all. It is something that you get only if you deserve. God decides whether you would believe or not.